from what I remember, I think the most controversial thing that I ever knew of you expressing was regarding the Holocaust. Do you feel like your views on those things could impact your ability to represent, for example, like the Jewish population of students?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. To be a little more particular, I come across newspapers from 1915 to 1935. New York Sun, Daily Post, a little scattered across the country.
Yeah.
And the video in question that I showed Walter, basically somebody had a really nice camera and laid all the newspapers out. And it's basically like, look, I'm just going to show you what they say. And here's the other thing with that. I don't have the physical copies of those newspapers. Is it absolutely possible there might have been some changes to it? Very, very likely. It's possible. But in these newspapers, there was just a very conflicting thing I had noticed. There was a continual reporting that 6 million Jewish people were facing they were facing starvation, being evicted from their homes over in Russia. And then 3 years later, it changed to Ukraine. And then it changed down here. And then it went back to Russia. And then, this is before World War II even started. So that was why I wanted to show Walter that, because it was a weird thing to me that, I always remember being told, unfortunately, that 6 million Jewish people lost their lives, which is a tragedy. But I was just really confused why newspapers 15, 20 years prior to that were reporting that 6 million Jews were dying and facing pain and starvation and all that. When World War II ended up happening and ending, and then, we come out and say, 6 million Jews unfortunately lost their lives. That was me from a journalistic perspective. That don't make no sense to me. It just doesn't. Now, if one was to assume that those newspaper articles were all true, which I can't make that assumption, to me it casts a very interesting light on where are we getting the final idea at the end of World War II for how many casualties happened. That doesn't mean that Jewish people were not in prison. That doesn't mean Jewish people weren't tortured. I can't say that. Nobody can say that. But I'm just looking at previous archived newspapers, and they're reporting a continual number that, I would expect if I read this in the SAC-B and it said 3 million people are facing death and aggravation over in Russia. The next time I hear about those people, especially 3, 4, 5 years later, I would expect I wouldn't see 3 million. Because there are people that are, unfortunately being pillaged and being killed, and it's terrible, but where's the updated statistic? And, post-World War I, we had a very accurate way of detailing how many soldiers died, how many human beings lost their lives, how many people got hurt, what state they were from. Like, we had a modicum way of being able to organize information in the early 1900s. So, that's kind of where I came from on that. Now, I'm definitely not going to go out and venture and say anything of, Holocaust didn't happen. There are tons of people that make that argument. And from a really non-biased perspective, I completely disagree, but I also completely agree. And what I mean when I say both is I don't know the answer. So as a human being, it's unfair of me to sit there and say, because I was told something my whole life, I know this to be the truth, and you are incorrect. People do that every day about everything. We don't even have to use, Jewish people as an example. Even the smallest detail. Hey, 49ers sucked this game. I watched it. It's a fact. Other person's like, no, dude, they rocked. They did great. Neither side's right or wrong, because neither side can really make that connotation.
Yeah. So would you consider yourself more skeptical than anything?
Very skeptical. Wear it on my sleeve, honestly. My whole mindset on something is if anybody has anything they want to state as a fact, if you ever want to come up to me and say, Cameron, this is a fact, my very first inclination to you is going to be, I will totally entertain that. You feel that's a fact. What is your supporting anything to assert that? I feel it deep down inside my heart. Okay, I respect you have the right and the ability to feel what you want to feel in your heart is true. That does not mean I'm going to concur with you. But I can respect however you feel. And
do you think that helps you in your representative duties?
I think it's essential.
Yeah. Did the early college experience with financial aid kind of shape what part of your platform is now as a student trustee?
To be honest with you, my whole interest in politics started when 9/11 happened, frankly. And the financial aid experience was just like another cherry sprinkle on top of my ice cream.
What about 9/11?
I found it really interesting, like looking back. I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened. And I'm sitting in my science class. I don't know what's going on. I didn't watch TV that morning. I had my Wheaties. My mom took me to school.
Yeah.
And my teacher puts on the TV. He's like, guys, I need to show you this. Something really bad happened this morning. And he put on the news, and it's 9/11, and the buildings are burning, and then we watch them fall. you're an 8th grade kid.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my God, it's terrible. People died. What happened? Who did this? Oh, it was Al Qaeda. No, now we got to go to Iraq. I mean, not my teacher saying this, but as the months and the years progressed, you get a little bit older, you get a little more able to think for yourself. And, I just look back and you go over kind of what has transpired since 9/11, the facts or the data that's publicly available since 9/11, and I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted there's been so many things that were given to the public that omit the key things that really detail what the 9/11 Commission didn't go over when they did their report. There's just a lot of factoids that a taxpayer needs to know, A, because it could affect the safety of them and their family, B, because they're taxpayers. Their money's being used to fund missiles to go over to the Middle East. So the question is, is there damning evidence for this kind of thing? And then, it came out, Bush is like, we never found weapons of mass destruction over there, but mission accomplished. I mean, I saw that, and frankly, it woke me up. I'm just like, my mindset is now, I don't feel the people that currently are our elected representatives represent even just my interests, because I can't speak for you. I can't speak for anybody else here, but I see that kind of stuff, they're not speaking for my interests. And that sends me through the roof. So that's what got it started. As you go along, now I see that there are people that I feel are not representing their fellow citizens the best. How can I represent my fellow citizens the best? Like, it's not a popularity contest.
Right.
It's not about getting rich. I've been poor most of my life. I've made it this far. I'm a pretty happy guy. Mm-hmm. I've had a pretty good time for not having money. You become a politician and you make, like I was saying with the trustees' vote being read first. 7 other people voted, yeah, I better vote, yeah. It's bullcrap. Mm-hmm. It's absolute bullcrap to me. And I can't say that is fact and that anybody that does that should not serve, because that's just my opinion, but that's my opinion. So that's why I feel so passionate about it.
So with the information you were talking about that you have, I don't know much about it. Like, what do you mean with the 9/11 Commission reports and stuff? Like, what's your opinion?
It's come to my understanding that there was a lot of background involvement to some degree in 9/11 with the least likely suspect a normal American may think, Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of, again, why I want to get into politics. You read a couple documents that pinpoint Saudi Arabia. You read that these 19 guys are from Saudi Arabia. And then you read the via Freedom of Information Act reports that are released to the public. And it's like you have that information, you had read it previously, but then you see the reports, the damning reports, and you see the big black marker over damn near half the document.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I can't really guess that says Saudi Arabia did this, and that, but why is this whole document redacted? How come the next 100 documents are all filled with black lines, but this is supposed to be informing a U.S. citizen what's going on? I understand the need for national security, but there also has to be enough transparency to say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm going to spend your taxpayer money to go kill another human being. I have absolute evidence to back this up as the right move. Here you go. I didn't get that. I didn't feel I got that as a high school student. I still don't feel I get that now as a tax-paying adult when we send somebody not just over necessarily Afghanistan and Iraq anymore, when we're doing bombing missions over in Syria to get rid of, ISIS terrorists and all that, when we're sending supplies out to Libya to help rebels overthrow the Libyan government, displace, millions of citizens, destroy infrastructure. Like, there's just things you look at and it doesn't add up. Mm-hmm. For me. If somebody else would see that and be like, hey, this all makes sense to me. Hey, who am I to tell you you're wrong? You're a taxpayer. You're just as equal as me. I don't see it that way.
I'm really interested in that, and from the perspective that it spurred your interest in politics. I know, like, I've heard a lot of people talking about what happened with the buildings. Are you in that camp, would you say? Like,
the really crappy thing about that is there are literally limitless conjectures somebody can make. Oh, it was demolition. Look at how these buildings got demolished and look what happened with this. See, that looks the same. Or, there's an inconsistency with the plane in this video. That. Or Larry Silverstein, who owned the World Trade Center towers, made buku trillions of dollars in insurance policies instead of having to tear his buildings down, which he was legally required to because they were contaminated with asbestos, because those planes brought them all down and he took out an insurance policy. Don't quote me on it. I want to say a week before. I could be a couple days off. It was very suspicious. Took out an insurance policy on all of his buildings. Terrorist attack happens. Buildings all crumble. Now guess what happened? You don't have to pay the cost to get your buildings deconstructed, health-wise. to get rid of the asbestos. You just made a bunch more money. Now you can rebuild your towers, which is exactly what seems to have happened.
Yeah.
So it's like...
Do you consider yourself, I think, do they call themselves truthers?
No. I first off consider myself a human being that's concerned with the information that my government and my particular nation I was born into communicates to me. It's just a personal observation. There's a very large stigma now of truthers, conspiracy theorists. I mean, it's almost mainstream now, where if you ask any kind of question about any kind of pertinent event, you might be a weird person. I might have to take a look at you. I completely feel the opposite. You're not patriotic if you're not out there not only looking at your government, criticize your government. The government should be bending over backwards to make you happy. That's what a real public servant is. A real public servant goes into that job and says, look, I already know who I am. I know what I believe in. And I like me. I like me as a person. So if somebody gives me a criticism or tells me I'm not doing my job right, cool. How can I be better for you? I get my salary from you. And I mean, I don't see that at all in politics nowadays. It's almost like politicians are in a different echelon compared to the rest of us normal tax-paying citizens. And it should be the complete opposite.
Right.
You know, I mean, Thomas Jefferson said, Benjamin Franklin said, anybody that sacrifices a little bit of freedom for security deserves neither liberty nor security. You know, and it's like, you look at today's world and you look at the Patriot Act and you see these provisions that are being put in place. You see the legislation they passed since Occupy Wall Street, decreeing that any kind of protest can legally be considered. I'd have to look at the technicalities of it, but basically you can be arrested for protesting now. It's at federal government discretion, right? You know, you have a Freddie Gray situation and you have hundreds, if not thousands of people on the street. They're probably not going to go out there and try to arrest everybody. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's a tool to have that 18-year-old kid who's still trying to figure himself out in the world and he has questions and he notices things. It's a tool for that kid to say, hey, I shouldn't go out with people that may disagree with this legislation that Sacramento just passed. I should stay at home because I could be arrested. I could be charged with something. That's sad.
Yeah. I know that you know about the Sac City incident. I think you came into the newsroom the day that it happened. Do you have any comment on what happened there and how the district's going to move forward from it?
I said this at the BOT meeting. I'd gladly say this to you. I'm very impressed with the district's response to the incident. This is what I mean. When something like a shooting happens on your campus, and I'm just imagining from my own perspective, I would imagine my very first thought would be, oh, there was somebody on campus with a gun. That's not safe. How do we make this campus more safe? I don't feel safe. But it's a lot bigger conversation than that, because you could ask yourself, okay, well, a shooting happened right on the outskirts of Sac City, basically on the campus. What if we put metal detectors in? You got to ask yourself, okay, do I want that at my college? Now, we've had a shooting, but this is the first shooting that's ever happened in the district's history. District's been around for, over 40 years, I think, almost? 30, 40 years?
But isn't that also symptomatic of school shootings are increasing by the year now?
It is. But then you'd really have to ask yourself, everybody, even experts and non-experts, have their own opinions on it. If you were to ask me, Cameron Weaver, why do you think school shootings are happening? I would not tell you it's because firearms can be legally purchased. I would tell you, well, if you look at all the major school shootings that have been nationally reported, every single shooter has one very weird thing in common. They were all taking antidepressant medication. What kind of antidepressant medication were they taking? Oh, Prozac. Oh, this, oh, that. Let me look up side effects for these medications. Oh, okay, the side effect of getting really manic and delirious and potentially crazy is very unlikely, but it can happen. It lists it here. So if you look at it, it's like, okay, we have this many amount of people taking this amount of antidepressants or this type of antidepressant. There's going to be one person that takes it and doesn't react well to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not saying, oh, give everybody a gun. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I have never, ever heard on TV in a national conversation anything about antidepressants. Anything. The Aurora, Colorado shootings, Newton, Connecticut shootings. I think the recent one in Virginia, I haven't looked into that. I don't know if that dude was on antidepressants or just a jilted ex-employee, but there's Columbine. There is a really big pattern with that. And that's another reason somebody like me wants to get into politics. I would love to be on the Senate floor and say, hey, we're talking about guns all day and night. What about this? How come nobody's discussing this?
Why do you think that is?
Well, see, if I was to tell you that I think that there's a stake from, FDA and the people that support the FDA or get financial kickbacks for being supporters of the FDA to not let that conversation happen, somebody might consider me a truther or a conspiracy theorist, which is kind of the circular argument I was mentioning earlier. But I wonder, as just a critically thinking young adult male, why that conversation hasn't happened, where there's that connection, It's just a weird world we live in. I feel like that shouldn't be looked at weird. I feel the opposite. I feel like everybody should be like, wait a second. Yeah, this is weird. How come we haven't explored this one little thing? And so what if it's a damning indictment of the FDA? If it's a damning indictment of the FDA, they're obviously not doing their job. And you need to get the people out that aren't doing their job and put people in that will do their job.
Okay.
So that's kind of my thought on it. With the district's response on the Sac City shooting, they went out there, they gave lunches to students, they've had an increased availability of counselors on the campus to help students that might have, even if you didn't witness it, it can be a traumatic experience. Having somebody available just to talk to, that's a really nice gesture. It's like, hey, I'm really sorry this happened to you guys. This really just happened, so we're trying to figure out the best way to respond. We have counselors on the scene. We made some food for you guys. I know it's not going to take away the pain of this happening, but we hope that this makes you feel a little better. Like, that's sweet. It's really, really nice.
So you don't think the conversation should be about gun control?
I don't. I don't.